The moment that so many of you, and frankly myself included, have waited for 10 months now, has finally happened. This past week on the Art of Wrestling podcast with Colt Cabana, we finally heard from CM Punk and his side of the story and the events leading up to his departure from the WWE. And I have to say, it's a very interesting, worthwhile listen. It truly is. If you haven't already, and I'm sure most of you have, but if you haven't, you need to go listen to it because it's very insightful and it is very interesting. And I'll say, some of my general thoughts about it. It seemed like Punk was very happy and content with himself and his current plot and place in life. Good for him. He sounded the happiest he's sounded in years. When he was talking about he's the happiest he's been in who knows how long, I could believe it because you could sense it, you could feel it, you could hear it. No doubt. He did sound somewhat bitter about some of the things that went down in WWE and what led to his departure from the company, but that's understandable. He has some right to be bitter about certain things. There's no question. But he wasn't so overly bitter that it made it impossible to believe anything that he said, or that it just totally, affected the view of the entire of what he said on the podcast. It was bitter, but not too unnecessarily so. Maybe, frankly, he had the right to be even more bitter sounding than he actually was. Frankly, to me, he sounded a lot like fans with some of his complaints about the company and the current state of said company and the creative direction of the company. He sounded a lot like a lot of us, frankly. The other thing that really came across to me was that I felt like he was giving his story, but not necessarily a totally full and accurate story. That's kind of the perception that I got. But again, very interesting. I recommend, if you haven't done so already, or any type of wrestling fan at all, you go and you listen to his appearance on Colt Cabana's Art of Wrestling podcast. Now, what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to talk about some of the things that I thought CM Punk was spot on about, some of the areas, frankly, where I thought CM Punk was off the money about, and then maybe talk about some of the ways that CM Punk disappointed me with what he said, or in some cases, what he didn't say or didn't do on this podcast appearance. It's funny because some of the things areas where I thought CM Punk was pretty much just spot on the money during his appearance on Colt's podcast made him in a lot of ways sound like a lot of us. Maybe that wasn't the way he intended to come across, but that's the way it is. In some ways, it's funny because I feel like he validated a lot of the things that we've been bitching and moaning and complaining about for several years pertaining to the WWE. And a lot of this fit into two primary categories. That was the hypocrisy of and within said WWE, and the WWE's previous, over the past few years, and current creative direction. And I use creative in a very, very loose way. As he's sitting there and he's talking, and he brings up some of these different subjects, I'm like, you know what, man? Spot fucking on. Fucking men. This is the type of shit I've been talking about for years. It's good to see somebody like a CM Punk saying it, because it sure as hell going to carry a lot more weight than if somebody like me, or let's say somebody else that got let go from a company like a Tyler Rex freaking said it. This is CM Punk. This is one of the big dogs. And he's saying a lot of this crap. It validates a lot of the crap we've been saying for years about this company, good, bad, and otherwise. And he's talking about how he wanted in 2011 to start having ads running his shorts. I don't know if this is true or not. I'm going off of what Punk says. But he's talking about how Vince didn't want to do it. He didn't want to do it. And then all of a sudden, several months later, Brock comes in, and they let Brock do it. So Punk can't do it, and he's a full-time guy, but they let the part-time guy come in and basically do the same thing that the full-time guy wanted to do. It sounds like something WWE would poo-poo, because why would you want to sit there and create another revenue stream for your wrestler that's not coming out of your pocket? And furthermore, if you're the WWE, why would you want to sit there and do something that is good business sense, potentially getting new sponsors into the fold, and knowing that without that platform that you provide for CM Punk to perform, his advertising deal really isn't worth much, you're going to get a cut of that. Why would you want more money? That sounds like the type of stupid crap that WWE would do. CM Punk's talking about how he got shot down from making an appearance at a UFC show in Chicago with his good friend Chael Sonnen, but then there's Triple H not too long after turning right around, being able to make an appearance with Floyd Money Mayweather. He's talking about the fact that he learned that it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. Sometimes we learn these lessons the hard way in life, and that often is the case. It's much better and easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. But he's absolutely right. How is there one set of rules for God and then a set of rules that everybody else has to pretty much follow if their name's not John Cena? He's talking about the fact that, with merch sales, there was a period of time where he outsold John Cena, but they were basically still making sure that he wasn't the top dog, that Cena was going to be the top guy. And for a company who for so long has used the fact that Cena was their top merch seller as an excuse to continue to pound that guy down your throat, now you do have a situation where somebody is outselling him, not with several years of history to it, but even a few months of it, and they never wanted to go there. They never wanted to sit there and go in a different direction. It was like they would try to undercut and circumvent CM Punk's heat and push and popularity to validate and further prove why the WWE is so right about John Cena. It's completely ridiculous. And he's talking about, with the Make-A-Wish stuff, that he did a lot of Make-A-Wish appearances and wish granting. I don't know if he did as many as Cena, like he said. He might have been bullshitting there just a little bit. He's talking about how, so many other individuals like him and so many others within the company do all of these Make-A-Wish wish grantings and appearances all the time, but it seems like the company only promotes John Cena, especially when it comes to television. And while they might post some stuff about people on websites and via Twitter, what have you, when it comes to the TV, when they make the big promotion and push for Make-A-Wish, it is always John Cena. Why is John Cena get all this attention when he's not the only one doing it? That is very hypocritical. He's talking about the fact that the WWE's concussion test is a joke. They're sitting there and they care so much about their employees and blah, blah, blah. But their concussion tests are a complete total joke. He's telling a story about how he was texting Colt with his headphones on while he was getting a concussion test. And then they wanted him to run the ring ropes and all of this. Well, at the end of the day, the WWE is a corporation just like anybody else that is a corporation. And they might try to put up that good fight. And they might try to sit there and pretend and allege that they really care about their employees, but they do not. They do just enough to put across that kind of mirage or image that they do in order to attempt to get more productivity out of the employees. And it's that simple. And he's also talking about, with the WWE and talking about the WWE Network. And talking about the fact that we're sitting here and pumping up this big, great thing, while on the flip side, we're not even bothering to tell you how you're going to get paid. And how basically you'll sit there and say in all these DVDs and all these interviews, you'd be like, oh, we wish people would speak out more. People are able to say whatever they want. We welcome that. But then if anybody challenges you or anybody says anything about it within the WWE, you're ostracized, blackballed, de-pushed, de-emphasized, if not flat out fired future endeavor. And he was like the only guy, it seems like, that was asking the question, what's going on here? How are we going to get paid? Where the whole business is about making money, it seemed like the WWE all of a sudden was totally and completely de-emphasizing money. And once again, basically trying to shut everybody up, even though they proclaim that they like it when people actually confront them. People like Vince and Triple H over the years have talked about the fact, allegedly, that they like when people disagree with them and say no to them and challenge them. But everything that they do clearly indicates that it is anything other than just that. And then you look at the WWE's creative direction. Punk talked about Vince being out of touch. I've talked about it before. Vince was out of touch, according to Vince himself, in 1997. Where the hell is he at the end of 2014? You see it in many different ways just how out of touch Vince truly is. He was talking about Triple H kind of killing momentum, talking about the fact that he resented Triple H for not putting him over in 2011 like the fuck he should have. Hey, fucking men, brother. I remember when I was somebody that was talking about this and how stupid it was and how fucking ridiculous it was and how asinine it was and how much it was going to kill CM Punk's momentum. And I had enough people saying, well, this is stupid, you're being too negative. It's good to see that CM Punk fucking agrees with me just how stupid and ridiculous this is and how much an enemy of progress Triple H can be when Triple H gets fucking involved. He talked about how Curtis Axel was supposed to get this push from Triple H and it didn't fucking happen. All of these people are supposed to get help because of Triple H and it ultimately doesn't fucking happen. There's still this mindset within this company that it's about Triple H. And in 2011, fucking A right. It should have been about CM Punk. That was CM Punk's time. And somehow it ended up becoming about Triple H where he beat CM Punk, but then a couple weeks later he's fucking gone anyways. That's the Breakfast Club and in particular Triple H playing their bullshit type of games. And that's in part what creates the environment that we see in the WWE today. Punk was talking about the thing of one of the biggest problems with the company that frustrates him, and it's not a way to run business, is what's next for anybody. He basically said Vince asked, what's next for Cena, and then doesn't give a shit. Well, when you look at the product right now, that is a tremendous problem. It affects continuity, storyline development, character development, everything. What's next for anybody? I mean, truly, what's next for anybody? How can you sit there and operate in this type of business and not have any long or even medium-term plans for anything that you're freaking doing? And if you do, it only revolves around one guy. How lazy, how ridiculous, and how much does this company and the people running that company lack in terms of professional pride and professionalism in general to sit there and operate under this mindset of what's next for anybody? Because we don't fucking know, because we don't plan it out. And again, that goes back to Triple H, and in particular, that goes back to the HNIC of all that you see in the WWE, Vincent K. McMahon, and just how out of touch he is. The older you get, the less patience you have. Now, Vince, being as old as he is and being around as long as he has been, being as out of touch as he is, has created this environment where nothing ever really gets accomplished. When you watch a WWE in recent years, it literally is like you're spinning your freaking wheels and they're not going anywhere. He was talking about the fact that him losing to Rock, and then losing to Rock again, and then losing to Taker, and then losing to Brock was stupid and bad for him. And he was right. He's absolutely right. You know, besides the fact that he turned heel, and that was also completely, totally ridiculous and stupid. The fact that he was sitting there and he had to lose to Rock, and he had to lose to Taker, and then he had to lose to Brock. He's basically losing to all these part-time guys, but he's the one every time that has to come back the next night. He's the one that's going to be there long-term. And at some point in time, you have to say, when is enough enough? And how is that possibly beneficial to him? And when you take the entirety of it all, you really have to sit there and say, how is that fucking beneficial to CM Punk or the WWE as a general? And then you talked about the intentional sabotage, where if people do speak out, even though the WWE claims that they love it when people speak out and they encourage people to speak out, how when people say something that the WWE, and in particular Vince or maybe Triple H or Stephanie, don't completely and totally agree with it, they will intentionally sabotage people. They will de-push them. They will de-emphasize them. They will take them off of TV. They will take them off of pay-per-view. And I find it funny, you know, when we talk about Chris Jericho saying that WWE doesn't intentionally sabotage anybody, you've got somebody like CM Punk, who I feel at times was a victim of being intentionally sabotaged his damn self, saying that it happens all the fucking time. And you know what? He's absolutely right. It comes back to the whole thing of what's next for anybody. It comes back to the whole thing of Triple H being the one that if you don't please him, he will fuck you over and kill you. And again, it's not a way to run a business. And so much of what CM Punk talked about in the WWE just rang so true to me, because so much of what they do makes absolutely no sense to me, because again, it's absolutely no fucking way to run a business. So yeah, again, there's plenty of stuff that CM Punk talked about during his almost 2 hours on Colt's Art of Wrestling podcast that I agreed with. But on the flip side, there were some things where I thought CM Punk was just completely, totally wrong, or I thought he was just totally talking out of the side of his mouth or blowing smoke up everybody's ass. You know, and I start off with the fact that we're talking about the WrestleMania main event. That's one of the things he was never able to do, was be able to main event a WrestleMania, and he felt he had earned that right. And I'm not disagreeing with him. I'm not saying that he shouldn't have had an opportunity to main event a WrestleMania. But my question to CM Punk would be, when in the fuck were you going to be able to main event a WrestleMania? You know, based off of the direction of the company at those times. When he was working with Rey Mysterio at WrestleMania 26, I don't think that would classify as anybody's version of a WrestleMania main event. WrestleMania 27, his feud with Randy Orton? No. That most certainly shouldn't have main evented. You look at WrestleMania 26, only one match could have main evented that show. Taker versus Shawn Michaels. I defy CM Punk to tell me otherwise. WrestleMania 27, based off of what ended up happening with the involvement of The Rock, the match between The Miz and John Cena had to main event that show, and you most certainly weren't going to main event with Puck versus Dan Orton. Furthermore, if things would have worked out the way they fucking should have, heading out of the summer of 2010 into 2011 of WrestleMania 27, if anything, the main event of WrestleMania 27 should have revolved around the Nexus in some way, shape, or form. So Punk had no business main eventing that pay-per-view. Now we get to 2012 and WrestleMania 28, and you're coming off of the summer of Punk in 2011, and if things would have been done properly, if the WWE wouldn't have been complete and total morons and screwed up the summer of Punk, then you could have made an argument that, hey, he deserved a main event at WrestleMania 28, except the problem is, the night after WrestleMania 27, the company had already launched into a Rock Cena program for 28. You're in Miami. Punk versus Jericho or anybody else for the title does not deserve the main event over Rock versus Cena in Miami. And what, WrestleMania 29? Maybe throw him in there in a triple threat? Okay, even if you throw him in there in a triple threat, yeah, it's a main event, but it would have sucked. About as bad as that match actually did between Rock and Cena anyways. Punk would have been bitching about it. Punk's fans would have been bitching about it. Most of us would have been bitching about it anyways. So you got that WrestleMania main event at WrestleMania 29, let's say. That's the only real opportunity I saw to see it happening, And to sit there and say, well, he wrestled Taker and that should have main evented. Okay, there's some argument to have said, well, the streak was a lie. That was the main event of every WrestleMania. It should have closed out every show because maybe no match could follow it, knowing that Punk and Taker could have been very, very good. But again, you were doing Rock Cena 2. And if you're the WWE, WrestleMania 28 was a pretty good financial success. You're not going to rock the boat. When Rock Cena main evented that one, you're going to do the same exact thing the next day, and you're hoping it's the same financial success. And then WrestleMania 30, even if you would have had the program with Triple H, there's no way in fucking hell that match is going to main event WrestleMania 30, period. So this whole thing about how CM Punk feels like he was robbed of his chance, I'm not saying he's totally wrong about that. I'm not saying he didn't deserve a chance to main event WrestleMania because he did. But at the same point in time, when the fuck was he going to get that opportunity? And what would have actually been right for business based off of the different parameters of that time frame from, let's say, 2010 to even 2014? When CM Punk says that it's not all about the money, bullshit. Professional wrestling is a business. It's a business about making money. What is the big reason for the complaint by CM Punk about not main eventing a WrestleMania? It's not the respect. It's not about all this bullshit that anybody would like you to believe or you'd like to believe yourself. It's the fact that CM Punk felt, and maybe somewhat rightfully so, that he deserved to be paid as much as anybody on the freaking roster, knowing goddamn good and well that in the WWE, the only match that counts as a main event, no matter what any idiots on the internet say, or no matter what anybody in the company, including CM Punk, tries to foolishly tell you in 2012 when he's mid-carding and semi-maining as a fucking WWE champion, the only match that is the main event of a WWE show, and in particular a WWE pay-per-view, always has been and always will be the last match of the night. That's the main event. Why is it the main event? Because that is always viewed as the primary draw of the event. Furthermore, that's the match where the people typically get paid the most money for. That's why it's called the main event. That's why everybody wants to get to the spot where they're working the last match on the card, because they get paid the most money. So for Punk to sit there and say that it's not all about the money is bullshit when he's talking about the fact that his real worth versus what the WWE values him at. He might be worth $8 million to the company, but they're going to try and pay him $500,000. Okay, the money fucking matters, and he knows it does. The money mattered enough to where he feels like he made enough where he could walk away from the company when he did. To say that it's not all about the money, or that money isn't the primary motivating factors with so many things pertaining to professional wrestling, either A, makes him a tremendously sized mark, which I would hope CM Punk would not be, or B, means he's being delusional and he knows goddamn better. He knows it's mostly about the money because that's what the business is about. That's what any business is about. It's about making money. This whole thing, too, this whole notion, I think is kind of ridiculous that Punk made himself and doesn't owe anybody anything. I think it's bullshit. Punk can sit there and say, well, I was CM Punk before I got to the WWE. Okay, and when you got to the WWE and the Titan Tower machine gave you that platform for all those years to ply your trade and work your craft and sell your name, that doesn't mean anything at all? All those fans, after all those years that bought all your merchandise, bought all your DVDs, bought the pay-per-views, even fucking streamed the pay-per-views around, what have you, they didn't help make you at all? The WWE powers that be didn't help make you at all? The people that you worked with over the years didn't help make you at all? I think perhaps of all the things that CM Punk said, that's perhaps the most ridiculous thing in the world. You are in the type of business where it can't all just be about you. Furthermore, you are not the only impactor or indicator of your success, period. And to sit there and say that he doesn't owe the fans anything, that he doesn't owe anybody else in the business anything, he doesn't owe the WWE anything for it because it was all him, it's the biggest load of shit I've ever fucking heard. It is. You know, how much he might owe the fans or how much he might owe, whatever. But to sit there and say that he did it all himself and that it's all because of him is delusional bullshit. You guys know it, and I think deep down in his mind and heart, CM Punk should know it too. The whole notion when Punk was talking about his confrontation with Triple H the night he left the company, talking about how Punk didn't need Triple H, that Triple H needed Punk. Is that so? I don't believe that to be true. Look, there's nobody that makes fun of God more than me and talks shit about God and the things that he does in the WWE and to the WWE and how he can negatively impact the WWE more than me. There's a reason I call him God, and it's not a good thing. But also, we are talking about God. For a CM Punk to sit there, a guy who has never main evented a WrestleMania, to say that Triple H needs him and Punk doesn't need him is fucking ridiculous. Triple H just moved on to fucking Daniel Bryan. He got his big money match. Triple H might have Sting. Then he might have The Rock at Mania. Triple H just got off of having 2 straight years of matches with freaking The Undertaker. Then after that, he worked with Brock Lesnar. For CM Punk, who sat there and worked WrestleMania matches with guys like Rey Mysterio and it's Randy Orton at the bottom of the fucking card. And he's going to sit there and say that Triple H needs him more than he needs Triple H? Who the fuck is he fooling? Who's he impressing? Because it most certainly ain't me. I know he can't possibly believe that bullshit. Now, he talks about how he was fired and that he didn't quit. And he tells the story about how they fired him on his wedding day. And there's no doubt WWE did that shit on purpose. They're like, oh, we're going to fuck with you. But at the same point in time, this gets into the whole thing about independent contractor and all of that. I find it very hard to believe that the WWE would sit there and allow you to basically abandon your job and leave, and then 5 months later wait to fire you. To me, that would technically be classified in the real world, CM Punk, as job abandonment, which would mean that you quit. You didn't show up to work for 5 months without any, like FMLA or any type of leave. God knows you're not going to get that in the WWE. That would mean that you abandoned your post. That means you quit. That doesn't make you fired. That means you gave up your job. It's an at-will employment type of situation, even with the contract you want to say. Okay, well, if you didn't show up to work for 5 months, you're going to say the WWE fired you. You already forfeited your job. That means you quit. This whole notion that he tried to spin it and make himself kind of look like the victim here, I thought was kind of pussy tactics to sit there and say the company fired him on his wedding day. Yeah, it's incredibly tasteless and classless by the WWE to send it out on that day. They know fucking goddamn good and well what they were doing and when they were going to do it. Well, that's the WWE for you, and that's the type of shit I would expect from the WWE. But again, for CM Punk to sit there and say that they fired him and he didn't quit, I think it's complete and total bullshit. If you're going to sit there and tell me that, well, he had an out in his contract and he could have got out of it at any point in time just like the WWE would, why in the fuck would the WWE give CM Punk or any wrestler that type of leverage whatsoever? Think about what a disaster that could be. WWE has far too much control over far too many things as they choose. You really expect me to believe that they would give CM Punk the type of contract where he could have opted out at any point in time? Because if you say, well, he opted out of it when he left that night, okay, then again, he still couldn't have fucking been fired because he had the right to leave at any time, meaning he fucking quit. No matter what, CM Punk quit. He cannot tell me that he was fucking fired, even if he produced a document telling me that he was fired from the WWE. No matter what semantics you want to use, he stopped showing up for work. He didn't show up for 5 damn months. Even if he wants to say WWE suspended him for a couple of months. There's still a couple other months after WrestleMania. What the fuck is that all about? He didn't get fired. He quit. Job abandonment. That's what it's called in the real fucking world. And then this whole notion that to CM Punk and his whole problem with the part-timers and their importance to the WWE, and he feels like they aren't as important as the full-timers, and he thinks that they're emphasized too much. To a certain degree, I don't disagree with that. To a certain degree, he's spot on the money. However, I say a couple of things. Number one, maybe if the people that are currently in the company, up to and including CM Punk, were better and drew more fucking money, maybe Vince wouldn't have to sit there and bring in these part-timers. Then on the flip side, I say to the WWE, maybe if you did better by your current talent and you did better with your product on a consistent basis to help these guys to draw more money, you wouldn't have to rely on these fucking part-timers so much. Goes both ways. But with that said, based off of the current environment, no, these part-timers are incredibly important because the WWE has to ensure a certain type of financial success. When Punk is saying that, oh, they don't add anything to WrestleMania because WrestleMania draws WrestleMania, he's somewhat true, but that doesn't tell the full story. It doesn't. You know, it's just like when you sit there and talk about the WWE when it comes to house shows, I might sit there and say that the WWE name draws itself. When you talk about WrestleMania, that's a lot of fucking money. Even for it being WrestleMania, there still has to be those matches. There still has to be those reasons for people to want to fork over that type of big money to go to fucking WrestleMania. So the concept and thought of it being WrestleMania is a part of a draw. But when you look at the financial success of 28 compared to 27, and you see the fact that Rock was wrestling in one of them and he wasn't in the other one, you can't just sit there and tell me that it is solely based off of the fact that it was WrestleMania. It does matter because it's about so many other things, merchandise sales. You know, at that time, pay-per-view buy rates, along with the tickets at prices that you could charge to the live event audience, so on and so forth. And based off of the situation that WWE has created for themselves, based off of the situation WWE finds himself in, not only are the part-timers more important for those cheap, short-term business pops, they grow in importance as the day goes by based off of the continued creative failures of the WWE, and they will continue to grow in importance and will continue to bring a diminished return as a result. But for Punk to sit there and say that guys like him are more valuable than a guy like a Rock or a guy like The Undertaker, especially at WrestleMania time, I think it's completely and totally fucking ridiculous. Because that's simply not the case. And if the WWE was better, and frankly, the talents like CM Punk and everybody else involved with the company were fucking better, and they could all get on the same page, and they could all figure out a way to draw more money, you wouldn't have to worry about bringing in the part-timers they can. So as a result, they have to bring in those part-timers. So it's just frustrating because, you know, I was hoping a guy like CM Punk that should know better in a lot of ways was going to know better. But in many ways, I thought, while there were a lot of areas where I thought he was spot on the money, I was just surprised with how much I really disagreed with him on this podcast. So there's things that I totally agree with Punk about, things where I thought he's totally wrong about this. But ultimately, in a way, while this was interesting and was insightful, I thought this appearance was somewhat disappointing because it left me expecting more. And maybe it was just my expectations were that he was going to say a whole lot more and say it in a different way. I don't really know. But I was left wanting a whole lot more and feeling like maybe we should have gotten a whole lot more than what we actually got. But some of the areas where Punk kind of disappointed me. First off was that he decided to do this on Colt Cabana's podcast. Look, I know this is his best friend, so he's probably in a comfort zone, and that's a good thing. And that's probably what led him to ultimately come out when he did and say the things that he said. But I don't think this was the best choice for a host of a podcast. And the reason I say that is because instead of Colt Cabana asking appropriate follow-up questions to certain things that CM Punk said, attempting to get clarity, maybe calling out Punk on some of the things that he said, you could tell that Cabana had a very pro-Punk slant to this and that he really wasn't trying to rock the boat or anything. Even when he was saying he was playing devil's advocate, he really wasn't doing so. He was just teeing it up for his best friend. Again, understandable. I don't knock Colt for that. I'm just saying is that in some ways, this could have been a lot better if there would have been appropriate follow-up questions. Like if I'm interviewing CM Punk and he tells me it's not about the money, my follow-up question is, okay, then why are you so concerned about the WrestleMania main event? And he says, well, the WrestleMania main event means prestige. It's a matter of respect. And I said, okay, but does that mean respect in terms of how you're viewed, or does that mean respect in terms of your paycheck? And this is ultimately about making sure that you get paid like the top-level guy that you view that you are. You see where that's an appropriate line of questioning that's not necessarily calling anybody out, but that is legitimate questioning that we just frankly didn't get. I mean, and it is. And again, talking about the WrestleMania main event, I would follow up with stuff like Colt did not, asking, okay, so why is main eventing a pay-per-view such a big deal now? We're back in 2012. You said it was not. Have your views changed on this, or was that something you were saying just to be a good company guy at the time, or have you always believed that, or do you not believe that and you're just saying this because you want to say this? That was, again, was kind of disappointing because I felt there were times where a real interviewer could have asked really tough questions and could have gotten a whole lot more out of CM Punk and a lot clearer and more concise, appropriate answers than what we kind of got, frankly. I don't think he necessarily needed to go there with Ryback. I mean, I'm just saying he did. That's fine, but maybe he didn't need to so much, especially calling him the steroid guy and everything else. Come on, dude. He did a little bit better than that, I think. Maybe he's pissed at Ryback. Maybe he feels that Ryback hurt him badly, maybe intentionally, but is that really the biggest reason why you're gone for the company? I find that hard to believe. The whole thing talking about the doctors being totally incompetent and inept. I don't disagree with Punk. Those doctors are going to try and do everything they can to get you back in the ring for WWE because WWE needs you there. But when they're giving you Z-Packs, which are a treatment for a staph infection, and you're saying that the WWE and the doctors just called it a fatty deposit and never identified it as a staph infection, I find that kind of hard to believe. So that kind of disappointed me with the Punk a little bit, was that he was sitting there and blaming the doctor so much and totally calling them incompetent. And I don't know if they were that incompetent. I'm sure they pretty much knew what they were doing, which is why they prescribed you Z-Packs, because they felt that fatty deposit might be a staph infection. Just saying. One of my biggest disappointments, though, with this whole thing was that CM Punk had an opportunity to really go ham on the WWE and the whole concept of the independent contractor, and he largely did not. I'm like, you're supposed to be a voice for the voiceless. So you have an opportunity here and a platform here to really speak for so many that lack the courage or the ability to speak up about these things, and you largely say nothing. This is supposed to be a guy that was so unafraid. This is supposed to be a guy that was willing to say whatever is on his mind. But you would think something that would weigh heavily on his mind is the fact that as a wrestler in WWE, you are listed as an independent contractor, but you can't go do anything without the WWE's permission. In the real world, perhaps an independent contractor would be, okay, you do this with us 4 days a week, and then the other 3 days of the week, you do whatever the fuck you want, unless it's specifically something we lay out in your contract that you can't do. But by and large, you're free to do whatever you want, unless you were underneath our wing at that time. Well, in WWE, you're an independent contractor, but you're basically their property all the time. I was expecting him to go into more about the fact that the WWE pretends to care so much about their employees, citing their wellness policy, citing how they put so many people into rehab to help them out. This is the same company that classifies its employees as independent contractors, so that way they don't have to pay the employer portion of the Social Security tax to the government. They put all of that other burden, the half of that burden, to the actual wrestlers themselves. They care so much about the well-being of their employees, yet they don't provide employer-provided health insurance to the wrestlers. This is an opportunity to talk about so many things. Talk about the fact that the WWE will never allow a union to get involved. That way the workers had the ability to make more money and get more protection for themselves, both while they're working and then especially after their working years down the road. And of course, he largely said nothing. This was incredibly disappointing to me because so much of what CM Punk could have said would have really resonated here. He knew that his voice was going to matter here. He knew that so many more people were going to pay attention to this and listen to this than on the typical shoot interview, ... And he largely said nothing. So it's his chance to speak out for so many. And I felt like in some ways CM Punk was being a little selfish and almost being kind of political here. Did any of you get the sense that he was holding back way more than maybe was called for, way more than maybe should have been? This is something that's been going on for almost a year. And, while you're sitting there repeatedly saying you didn't want to be a shoot, you didn't want to be a shoot. Well, damn it all, maybe there were times where it needed to be a freaking shoot. And if there was a time where it needed to be a freaking shoot, you could have talked about the hypocrisy of the independent contractor status in WWE and the fact that this company does not care for their employees nearly as much as they try to prostitute out that belief to the mass public that they do. And CM Punk on this matter was largely silent. Unless it pertained to him specifically, it seemed like, frankly, he didn't give a fuck. That's just the way it was. And the biggest thing of all to me is the fact that he's talking about this, he's talking about that. Specifically, when he's talking about Vince was talking him into coming back, he owes him one, then he owes him another one, and then Vince, you owe me three. When am I ever going to get payback for any of them? You know, and the fact that he's blaming Ryback for getting hurt and taking 20 years off of his career or his life or whatever the hell he said, and this and that. You know, not nearly enough of CM Punk, frankly, taking accountability and blaming himself. The reason Vince was able to do that, Punk, was because you allowed him to do that. And that's the truth. That's the reason. Punk was in a position, whether he wants to acknowledge it or admit it or not. He was in a position. He was one of those few guys that could tell Vince no. That could tell Vince, fuck you, I'm not doing that. No, that's stupid. No, screw that. I'm going to take my time before I come back. But Punk didn't do that. He didn't stand up for himself. And in part, CM Punk, based off of his style of work over the years, based off of the fact that he wouldn't say no to Vince and that he would come back in a hurry, led to the point where he got to that breaking point because he didn't vent, because he didn't get it out of his system, because he didn't do the right things at the right time for himself to take care of himself, which was most important to him. You would think that he ended up exploding, probably overreacting and exiting stage right to where we haven't seen him on a WWE ring in 10 damn months now. All the things we can talk about with this and that and everything else, ultimately that's on Punk. Punk's supposed to be the independent contractor. Punk's supposed to be the guy that's looking out for CM Punk above everybody else. So if Vince or anybody else in the company took advantage of him or exploited him or fed on his weakness, that's Punk's fault. That's anybody else's fault. You know, again, I was kind of disappointed with the whole thing of CM Punk kind of presenting himself like he'll be fine and this and that. You know, if you're so above wrestling and you hate wrestling so damn much, then why don't you go around calling yourself Phillip Brooks now? Why don't you call Phil Brooks? You're still having everybody refer to you as CM Punk. Okay, other people might buy your bullshit. I do not. You know damn good and well that a lot more people care about you because you're CM Punk than if you're just Phil Brooks. Nobody would give a shit. And that's the truth of the matter, except your friends and your family. But they're ultimately not paying your bills and not still buying your merch and following you on Twitter. But again, this was a really insightful interview, and it was interesting, and I did enjoy it. It was a good listen. Like I said, I'm glad to hear that he's so pleased with himself and he's happy with himself. He sounds healthier. He just sounds like he's in a better place, and ultimately, that's good for him. And if that's what's important to him the most, then Godspeed to him. Do I buy when he says that he'll never have a working relationship with the WWE again? No. Do I think it'll happen anytime soon? No. But I think at some point in time, cooler heads will prevail. Punk will get enough time away to where he maybe gets that itch to say, is that really the way I want to go out? Is that really how I want my legacy to end? Do I really want that to be the last major payouts that I get from all these years? You know, I don't buy that. I think we will see CM Punk back in the WWE someday. Could be a year from now. Could be 3 years from now. Could be 5 years from now. But you're going to have a hell of a time convincing me that he's so much different than anybody else. Because even as I listened to this interview, frankly, he didn't sound that much different than a lot of other people. He sounded so much like so many others.